Hello friends, I'm Joe Skynet and I welcome you to another GreenStuffWorld video. In this video we're going to be painting a crystal base, but we're going to be painting it as if the crystals were glowing from the inside. First we're going to do a quick dry brush to pull out all the textures of the base. Just a simple grayscale dry brush, using first a medium grey and then a lighter grey over that. This way we can easily mark all the textures and pull out all the terrain on the base. Now we're going to use some dip inks to get some colour on the base quickly. I've chosen two different tones of green and a purple. Using these colours will give us a dark tone on the terrain. Because we're painting the crystals as if they were glowing, we want the rest of the base to be a darker tone. I'm applying the three colours at the same time to be able to blend them easily together. Once we got the base colour of the terrain down, we start with the details on top of the terrain, which in this case are some broken tools. We're going to paint the wooden details using a couple of different browns and a light ochre. I paint the wood brown first, and then with a lighter colour I go over and make some small lines and dots to give it some texture. Now for the metallic parts, first I'm going to give it a base coat in black. Then with the lighter grey mixed into the black, I start highlighting the metal. I'm not worrying too much in getting this metal perfect because I'm going to be applying rust over it, and then on top of that it's going to have the glow from the crystals, so you might not even notice the metallic effect after that, but it's always nice to paint it before. Now with that lighter ochre, again I'm going to give the stone a bit more texture, to give it a bit more definition. I'll be speeding through most of these processes because most of them are just repetitions. Using the liquid rust pigment, we're going to apply some rust over the metal. First with the darker rust in all the recesses, and then I go over that darker rust with the lighter rust in a few spots. Okay, so now we have the texture ready, we're going to start preparing the area for the glowing crystals. First we're going to paint the actual OSL, which is the light halo that's glowing off of the crystals. For this we're going to thin down a bit of white primer with thinner, and we're going to apply it in the airbrush. What I'm aiming for is all around the base of the crystals, until I consider it's a strong enough halo of the glowing crystals. You want to get it right at the base of the crystal where it meets the texture of the floor, and then spread that halo out a bit. This white colour will mark where our glowing halo will reach. Once we've waited for them couple of coats to dry, we're going to go over the whole white area with the fluorescent red. Fluorescent colours are very transparent, so we're going to give it 2 or 3 coats until we have a nice saturated colour. And we're just aiming over the white areas we did in the previous step. So now we have the first colour of the OSL down. We're going to base coat all the crystals in this dark blue. Okay, so now that we've base coated the crystals, we're going to move on to pure white to start with the OSL effect, this time applied with the brush. First, same as before with the airbrush, I start right at the base of the crystals, but this time I'm not expanding as much as we did with the red colour. I'm also painting all the edges where the light of the crystals is going to bounce off of, like the tools and some of the rocks in front of the crystals. Now I'm going to start stippling inside the base of the crystals. My idea is to have the crystals glowing from the inside, so I start stippling with the white at the base of the crystals, making the dots quite big and close together at the base of the crystal, and as I move upwards I use smaller dots and try to separate them out more to create a gradient. We're going to do this in all the vertical faces of the crystals. I'm also getting the white into all the recesses of the crystals, where one crystal joins with the other. This will increase the glowing feeling. As I said before, because this is just repeating one crystal after the other, I'm going to speed up the video. Okay, so once I'm happy with that, I move on to the orange fluorescent. And I'm going to cover over all the white areas we did in the previous step. And the same as with the red, this is going to need a couple of coats to get a strong, vibrant colour. Okay, so once that is dry, we're going to repeat the same operation as before, but reducing the area of application. So I start around the base of the crystals again, but this time I don't expand it as much as before, and same with the dots on the crystals. I try to leave a bit of the previous step. Okay, so once I'm happy with that, and we've let enough time for it to dry, now same as before with the orange, but this time with yellow, we're going to cover over all the white areas we did in the previous step. Now the glowing effect is really starting to take place. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the red fluorescent colour that we applied with the airbrush before to reinforce the red areas and enhance others. As you can see, I'm just going over the areas that were already marked by the airbrush in the first steps. When you're using any colour in the airbrush, it always greys out a bit. The airbrush always makes colours grey out a bit, so I like going over them after with the brush again to reinforce them colours. Now I'm going to make a dark mix using the purple dip and a bit of black to paint all the shadow areas. Painting the actual shadows in a darker colour really enhances the feeling of the light source. Now using the orange fluorescent, I go over the orange areas again and blend it into the yellow area a bit. Okay, now for painting the actual crystals, I've chosen these purplish bluish tones, and I'm going to start painting all the faces that are pointing upwards. If we imagine a dark blue crystal, these crystals have lots of facets pointing upwards, and each one is pointing in a slightly different direction. This means that the light will be bouncing off them with different intensities depending on where that facet is orientated to. So I try to paint each face of the crystal in a slightly different hue from the one next to it. This way it will feel like the light is bouncing off of it in different directions, and only some of them will be highlighted in the lightest colour and the others will be in the darker colours. If I painted all the faces of the crystals in a light colour, none of them will appear to be shining. In each view you only want one or two faces to be the brightest. As you can see, I'm building up the brightness gradually until I'm happy with the result. Okay, so now that we've painted all the colours on the crystals, for them to really look like crystals we need to highlight all the edges. For this, first I'm using a light grey and I'm going to highlight absolutely all the edges. I'm also adding some cracks to the actual faces of the crystals. This will increase the feeling of them being of a glassy material. These crystals have tons of edges, so I'm going to speed through this. Now once I've highlighted all the edges, I move on to white, and now I'm just going to highlight the edges that are facing upwards, and on the rest of them we're going to make some dots and lines. Try not to highlight all the edges that we did in the previous step, because same as when we painted the faces on the crystals, if we paint all of them in the same white color that we're using now, none of them will appear to be shining, because they will all have the same tone. Okay, so now for the final touch. As always, for the bases we need to paint the edge in a black color to help frame whatever's on top. Well, this is the result. I hope you've enjoyed the process and found it useful. You can choose any colors for the crystals and any color for the OSL and create a cool effect using this easy process. Okay friends, see you in the next one. Bye.